there's also many separate kind of coins that I'm keeping track of, or that the Plasma chain is keeping track of. And for simplicity, you can think of, say, 1,000 coins as being 1,000 separate objects. So on the actual ledger, on chain, these 1,000 coins are all controlled by the Plasma smart contract. And what happens is that there exists some kind of mapping of ownership based on these messages signed off chain that says that you have this coin, someone else has this other coin, someone else has this third coin. And if you want to send your coin to someone else, you send a transaction that does that.
Yeah.
And then every 15 seconds or minute or some interval of time, I take everyone's transactions that were submitted basically since the last time I made a commitment, and I put these transactions together and make a cryptographic commitment to them. So for more technical people, basically you make a Merkle tree, you publish the Merkle root on chain.
Yeah.
But what this means to a kind of technical layman is that I am publishing a kind of piece of cryptographic data on chain where the piece of cryptographic data is very small, but I can use that piece of cryptographic data later to prove to anyone that some particular transaction was included.
Yes.
Or I can also use it to prove that for some particular coin, so say for coin number 193, no transaction was included at that particular time.
Yes.
And so what you can do is that if you want to check that you actually have coin number 193, you ask the Plasma operator for the entire history for coin 193.
Yeah.
So for all of these Merkle branches, for all these cryptographic proofs that say at every interval what happens to coin 193.
Sure.
And if the Merkle branches say, step 1, Alice deposited it, step 2, 3, 4, 5, nothing happened, step 6, Alice gave it to Bob, step 7, 8, 9, nothing happened, step 10, Bob gave it to you, step 11, 12, 13, nothing happened, then that information convinces you that you have the coin. And then if you want to actually withdraw the coin, then what you do is you can take the Merkle branch, this proof of this transaction, and you can submit it on chain, then you can wait, and there's some period of time where someone can challenge you with a newer proof that says, oh, now they actually have the coin,
Yeah.
and if no one challenges you, then at some point you can get the coin out.
Interesting, and makes a lot of sense. Colin, any follow-ups?
Yeah, so I guess my question kind of follows on this and goes back to the netting aspect and capital efficiency. One of the things that we have in traditional financial markets is the idea of a central clearing counterparty or just a bank doing derivatives clearing. I wonder, so the system you describe in a payment channel is, I want to send you 5 coins. I don't have a channel with you. I have a channel with Simon, and Simon happens to have 5 coins. I can send him 5 coins and he passes it on to you, and that happens near instantaneously. There may be an issue, though, where I need to pass you 5 coins every day for the next 5 years, and Simon doesn't have that amount of money today to do it. But we could introduce some kind of fourth entity that would say, right, if Simon doesn't pass you those coins, I will make sure you get those coins. And that becomes kind of a clearinghouse. And I need to keep some money with him, Simon needs to keep some money with him. Maybe you do as well. Do you see something like that, whether it's centrally or decentralized, emerging or already emerged?
I think things like that can totally, definitely happen. And it's the one thing that's probably worth keeping in mind is that the kind of public blockchain cryptocurrency ecosystem probably can't support kind of actual debt very well. So we can't support the idea that, no, I'm going to promise to pay you these coins for the next 5 years, and there's some mechanism that'll either insure you or do something to me if I don't pay up, because basically participants are just anonymous and can disappear at any time.
Yes.
And that, I think, is the key reason why so many things in public blockchains, instead of relying on identity-based penalties, rely on these financial penalties in the form of cryptocurrency that gets deposited into smart contracts that can then take those deposits away as a penalty if they prove that you did something wrong.
Yes, interesting. And I guess that kind of leads us to that blurring line between the world of like the enterprise blockchain and DLT and the kind of the public blockchain world. Do you see those two worlds coexisting, or is it kind of an either or?
I'd say definitely coexisting. I'd say there's definitely many places where enterprises can benefit from data going onto the blockchain. One important thing to keep in mind is that pretty much any mechanism on a public blockchain that can work using financial penalties to incentivize people can also work if you assume that there are going to be social penalties to penalize people who misbehave. If you can gatekeep the participants and make sure that those participants actually are vulnerable to whatever your social sanctions are.
Indeed.
And that is something that basically you can do, because in order to financially penalize someone, you need to prove that they did something wrong. But then with a blockchain, like if you prove that you did something wrong, you can just publish the proof, and then that published proof is what can be used to apply whatever the social sanction is.
I think we agree that this sequence of events did indeed occur, then makes it much easier to move on to the, like, so what should we do about it piece.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, there are plenty of cases where public blockchains can be used as a kind of tool for different kinds of mechanisms to use, in similar to how you would use cryptography, except having different use cases to cryptography. And that's something that you can use even if, for example, you're totally not interested in using cryptocurrencies for financial incentives. So I can just go through one very simple example.
Please do, yeah.
So let's suppose that I'm running an auction, and let's say I have this cup of tea, and because this cup of tea is such a wonderful work of art, it has 11FS on it. There's a bunch of people that are willing to pay thousands of dollars for it, and you have an auction, right? So one of the kind of fairly standard types of auction is what's called a second price auction, where whoever bids the most wins, but they pay as much as the second highest bidder.
Yes.
And this kind of auction is generally considered superior by economists because, like, basically you don't really need very complex strategies to figure out how you should bid. You just basically bid the maximum amount that you would be willing to pay for the item, and if you get it, or you bid that amount, and then if you win, you know that you'll have to pay less than that amount, and if you lose, you know that, well, had you won, you would have had to pay more anyway.
Than you were willing to.
Yeah, so the problem is, though, that with this kind of auction, you can cheat fairly easily if you're the operator, right?
Yeah.
So suppose, for example, 3 people bid in this auction. One of them bids 100 pounds, one bids 200 pounds, one bids 500 pounds.
Yeah.
And I, as the operator, see these 3 bids, and I know that the outcome looks like it'll be the person with 500 who bid 500 pounds wins, and they'll have to pay 200. Now, I'm colluding with the person selling the cup, in this case because I am selling the cup, and I insert my own bid for 499 pounds. And I can do this because I see what these existing bids are, and so I can insert this bid, and now the same person wins, but instead of having to pay 200, they have to pay 499. Yeah. So the way that you can theoretically solve something like this with a blockchain is you split the auction up into 2 stages, where in stage 1, everyone publishes a commitments to their bid. So everyone publishes the hash of their bid on chain. And then during that stage, no one sees the bids. Then Then stage 2, everyone reveals the bids. And once people start revealing the bids, well, you can't submit any more commitments because that stage already ended. And so I don't have this ability to kind of cheat you out of those $299.
And that would include the operator as well. Colin, any thoughts on that one?
No, I think it's an interesting method of looking at stuff. And I guess the question that I always have with auctions, and I was reading your Radical Markets paper review as well. It's interesting when you start to look at how stock exchanges work, and even inside of those, there's lots of different auctions and different types of markets. I'm wondering in this is, given that you have to kind of wait for batches in kind of a continuous auction model, is there not something where you can more or less run a centralized limit order book of some sort to achieve the same effect?
Well, it depends, I guess, on what your use case is. Like in this case, I'm literally talking about an auction where you're selling a cup, and so you want to have like a 2-week period so people can learn about it and figure out what their bid is and so forth.
Yeah.
And there definitely are rationales for running things like order books on some kind of chain.
Yeah.
Like, there has fairly recently been this kind of movements toward frequent batch auctions because they give you a lot of benefit in terms of removing the high frequency trading arms race at a fairly low cost, because like you lose kind of a few seconds of information efficiency, but that's not really all that bad. And that's something that could even be, for example, very useful for cryptocurrency exchanges. And I know there are projects that are trying to do that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, but regardless of what specific mechanism that you're using, unless you want the mechanism to kind of finish on such a short time scale that blockchains are too difficult to use, like in those cases, then the thing that I described probably doesn't work well. But in other situations, that's like totally, totally an improvement to just add these blockchain commitments on, because that just strictly reduces the set of ways in which you can cheat people.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I got to move us on because I think there's so much we could dive into on that piece. But I really wanted to get onto, whilst we're removing centralized actors from auctions, we could also talk about decentralizing Ethereum. There's always this question of, is Ethereum centralized around Vitalik? How do we decentralize Ethereum?
Yeah, well, actually, I think there's been a huge amount of progress in decentralizing Ethereum already.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if you just look at all of the concrete governance actions that happened in the last 12 months, number one, like a lot of the features in the Constantinople hard forks that are launching in January basically happened without me. Number two, issuance reduction from 3 Ether to 2 Ether, which is going into Constantinople. I was not involved at all. Number three, the Ethereum quote 1.x stuff, these short-term scalability improvements that are going onto the main chain before we can switch over to sharding. That whole effort started without my involvement at all. The efforts even around like Casper and sharding, like I'm heavily involved in writing the spec, but the actual implementation is being done by something like 5 different teams that are all like basically doing the code and that are all increasingly actively contributing to the development of the spec. So, I mean, I would not have been able to confidently say this 18 months ago, but I really do feel like the community is kind of capable of acting autonomously at this point.
That's really powerful.
I mean, that's definitely not to say that I'm looking at disappearing. That's like, that's the thing that the trolls generally tends to interpret me saying when I say things like this, but I'm definitely not disappearing.
Well, so flipping that, what's exciting you and what is keeping you busy?
I have a point on that. So you've talked about, and I think this is a really interesting point. You talked about a lot of things that have progressed kind of without you having to put your hands into it or get involved or manage it. My question, and a lot of what I hear the trolls that you're referring to talk about is, if something was to go wrong and essentially we came to something that looked like the Bitcoin hard fork in 2017 of, do we expand the blocks or do we do something else? The argument is, a lot of people would look to figures, be it you or be it somebody else from the early Ethereum Foundation. Do you feel confident, or would you feel confident in the future that the Ethereum community could solve something that came to loggerheads like that without you or somebody else from the foundation?
I'm sure that when the time comes to it, it will be able to.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's not been battle tested with that, and I guess, and are you okay with it forking? Like, what is, like, I guess it's head and heart situation, right? Because that is a possibility.